Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 472. We do our Batman the Killing Joke commentary track. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. It's the Killing Joke, Sean, not the Gilling Joke. So says the Sensei of the Whatnot Segulin and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
And I'm saying that because of the fact that this is the second time that we recorded the opening, because I did in fact call it the Gilling Joke, which sounds like an Aquaman movie. So on that note, we are going to be doing a commentary track on the Killing Joke. And you'll actually hear us during the sequence where we'll tell you when we're at that Warner Brothers opening screen. And we do that on purpose because if you want to follow along with us as we're having our conversation, due to the nature of some of the controversial bits, there are bits where we basically just start, rambling on about those sequences because there's a little bit more depth into our thoughts on them. But we do repeatedly reference what's going on screen, and we're watching the movie in real time while we're having this conversation. So feel free to sync up and join us on this one. But we did provide an episode that hopefully you can listen to in your car and enjoy just as much. So hopefully you enjoy our commentary tech of Killing Joke. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Jim, sponsoring us this episode is, of course, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. What can you tell us about DCBService.com?
Come on, you know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about bundles. DCBS always offers some great bundles. Check them out. Right now we're currently on the July order. The August month hasn't come up, so I can't tell you what the new bundles are going to be, but we know they're going to offer them because that's the kind of people DCBS are. Thank you very much.
Over at InStockTrades.com, I always talk to you about the deals of the week, and right now they've got the Detective Comics hardcover volume 8. It's 50% off, only $12.49. They've got the Suicide Squad Silver Age Omnibus. This is 50% off, only $24.99. If you're looking for these omnibuses or hardcovers, trade paperbacks, whatever you're looking for, you want to go to InStockTrades.com. I go there a lot when I miss something. It's like, oh, I didn't know that came out. They've got the new Suicide Squad trade paperback. That's 45% off. It's volume 3, only $9.34. They're constantly having deals. It's the way, if you miss something, to go and pick it up at a deal. I like this because when I get trades, usually it's a series a lot of times that I've heard some buzz around. Sometimes when it's 2 or 3 trades in, it gets kind of costly because I read a lot of comics, and it's great to be able to go there and pick up like 2 or 3 different trades, pick up a hardcover, just save some money on those things. By the time I'm done by picking up 3 or 4 of them, I've gotten 1 or 2 of them for free, depending if they were 50% off or not. It's a great way to save some money and maximize my reading, because to me it's always about comics have 2 different problems. It's time to be able to read everything I want to read, and it's the money to be able to keep up with everything. And I do, while I'm a huge DC fan and I love Vertigo and everything that we talk about on our show, there's a lot of stuff being published by Image and Marvel and all across comics that I love to read as well. A lot of times I rely on the positive buzz that people are generating on these books. InStockTrades.com is a way to pick that stuff up. So I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of Batman the Killing Joke, both original graphic novel as well as the current adaptation animated feature. So if you haven't read the book or seen the movie, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Just to be sure, we're not talking about the Gilling Joke?
Right, not the Gilling Joke, the Killing Joke.
Well, with that, let's kick into the movie.
Spinning with great speed, the Flash creates a protective vacuum around himself.
So Jim and I this episode are going to talk about Killing Joke. And I know sometimes when people are listening to this, they like watching the film along with us. We fully recognize that as we talk about this movie, there's going to be certain sequences where we're going to sidebar and we won't be lining up with the film. But we are actually having the film running while we're having this conversation. Jim and I are both on the Warner Brothers animation logo. And we're just going to, Jim, I'll go 3, 2, 1, and we hit play. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
3, 2, 1, go. All right, so Killing Joke. This is a film that was released in, a comic that was released in March of 1988, roughly. I found that from Wikipedia, but I guess I was under the impression that Death in the Family preceded this. because of the fact that it appears in part of this. And in my mind, I didn't realize that this actually came first. I mean, I read them both as they came out when I was a kid, but they were in the same year-ish of their release. This actually came first. This movie has, and we're seeing it in the opening sequence, this opening narrative of Batgirl. What did you think of this film overall? What did you think of the opening Batgirl sequences? Because she talks about the thrill of being a vigilante in the beginning of this.
See, as a concept, I like the idea that they tried to tell a Batgirl story. Mm-hmm. And, it's weird because on one hand, I completely understand some of the criticism, but on the other hand, this was a Batgirl story. I didn't completely agree with their assessment of who Batgirl is and who Barbara is. I'm one of those guys who likes that really, the really strong, powerful, that Batgirl who, is an equal with Bruce, who's an equal with, Dick and Tim, and just on the intellect, just on the skill, and just on who she is. This is a younger Batgirl who hasn't had that road that, who hasn't traveled down that same road yet. So it is a little bit throwing off for me to see her not as a peer to Batman.
Now, I'm going to actually caution that bit because that's a part where I have a problem with some of the criticism. Now, there's bits of the criticism I completely agree with that we're going to have to talk about when we get there. But you have to remember Batman's relationship with pretty much everybody he teams up with, including the Robins that you mentioned. Bruce is incredibly hard on them.
Yes.
When anything goes wrong or there's any risk to them, he immediately blames it on their lack of being him. He mainly because of the fact that he feels responsible. This is a character flaw of Bruce's, not those people. Barbara in this, actually, for quite a bit of it, I felt that Barbara played a very strong character. Now, you mentioned something that I think is pretty critical here. This is a young Batgirl. This is not the seasoned Oracle or even seasoned Batgirl that she later became in the comics predating this. The other part about this is they're trying to fit a lot of Batgirl into a sequence where Killing Joke is really a Batman Joker story. Barbara's role in that is she's been retired from being Batgirl and, was shot. So they're adding a lot of story in here to try to introduce us to Batgirl and give you that sequence. I do think her relationship with Batman in the beginning is very similar to the Robins. Every one of them had this same relationship with Batman, except for bits where it goes later on.
Right.
The opening sequence, as far as actually seeing her operating as Batgirl, did you have issues with that because of the fact that she was not perfect? Or because obviously she's not as seasoned as Bruce, and I do agree with that part. I don't know that's a criticism, though, because she's young.
Yeah, I didn't have really an issue with these opening sequences, especially when she's sitting there talking and basically stalling while Bruce comes up and hits him with the car.
Yes.
But the one cool sequence, though, was you saw she had her Batarang in her hand, and she was palming it. If she needed to fire, if he was going to fire, she would be able to react. She would have been able to. She was, it looked like a position where she maybe could get hurt, but she was taking precautions. Now, so that kind of side, it's not I don't want to say she's a weaker Batgirl, but she's not that same. Again, it's that she's not that same hardened, and Bruce refers to it later on about staring out at the abyss and all that stuff, and just that nature, that she hasn't gone to that dark place yet, and you see that in this version of Batgirl right here, whereas the Batgirl I'm used to reading, the Batgirl I'm used to dealing with, has already had that darkness, who's dealt with the abyss, who's been, who's gone through the Killing Joke story. So it's kind of weird. It is a connection for me. So again, it was like when I was first watching this, it was like I just kept telling myself, young Batgirl. I wasn't thinking, and that was the thing that kept me kind of in the groove of, enjoying. And it's that I was enjoying the story. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy the story, but this was an interesting adjustment for me in dealing with Batgirl making what I saw as rookie mistakes with this guy.
See, here's the problem. The rookie mistakes part with her, I honestly feel Batman made as many mistakes. If you take a look at when Batman goes to confront them, they took him out in a very similar way to some of the mistakes that she made. So I didn't feel she looked, as far as in the field, her portrayal as Batgirl, when she's in the cape and cowl and behaving as Batgirl, I think she looks relatively as strong as Bruce does. As far as the Abyss bit, I always thought that Batgirl, very similar to Robin's role, they keep Bruce from the darkness. Here's the issue that I have, and we're starting to see these sequences now where she's in library mode.
Yeah.
And this is where they start implying that she has some sort of feelings for him that are beyond, at first it was like he was a mentor and a sensei and all that, but there was this implication now that he was the man in her life. And at first, when I was watching this the first time through, I had zero issue with it, because I'm like, okay, they're making an assumption that she's seeing this dark, mysterious guy and that type of thing, when really, in truth, it's just her moonlighting at Batgirl, and people, will jump to those conclusions. Until later on, we get the idea that he really is, in her mind, the other person in her life. And I have a problem with that. And we're going to get to that later on. But as far as her competency, I don't think that she looks incompetent. If anything, I think in the sequences where Batman admonishes her, he looks like the jerk there. Batman looks bad in those sequences because he's being really unfair to her. I don't think she did anything wrong. Like, the only sequence where he really rescued her was the sequence where she was in the safe, and it could be argued that she rescued herself.
Well, she improvised, adapt, overcome. She should have, and again, it's the whole argument: should she have waited? Because the bad guys are robbing. She's like, they're getting ready to leave, and that's when she initiated, or did she initiate too soon? Because that's my big question. Granted, you got to have confidence in your fighting ability. You got to have confidence to make the right move. You can't second guess yourself in the field. So I understand in that way. I understand when she made the attack, but these three goons, she should have taken them. And that's the thing that gets me is the Paris dude. He's not that tough. I don't know why she didn't. She should have taken the three of them. And I like how she's sitting there and she's hitting from the shadows. She's doing the bat thing, but you can immediately see this guy isn't afraid of her. You can immediately see this guy who's got just his personality. And again, it's one of those things where he was the right villain to take her down. So I don't have an issue with that, but I do have a problem with this confrontation she has with this guy. I don't know. It was something when I'm watching this first time. I was like, oh yeah, she should wipe the floor with this guy, and she didn't.
But you're okay with the fact that he took down Batman later.
Well, I'm okay he took down Batman later because of the way he did it with the heavy rockets, etc. Because you notice later Paris shifts on the game plan instead of doing Paris did the ambush and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like he learned from the past on how to take out a bat. So the guy is smart, but it's a weird conflict I have in my head where I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, kind of I don't want to say amateur, but it is. She should have, I don't know. It's a tough call for me.
Here's the thing. I would argue that you could give the same amateur comment to Bruce, who drove into a trap.
Right.
And he could have had backup with him. He chose not to because he was being stubborn, which is another rookie move.
Well, yeah, Bruce's mate did make some mistakes here. I'm not going to say he didn't make it. He's without fault. He definitely had some issues where if he had been more trusting, if he had been a better partner, and we've seen that in the past from Bruce where he doesn't do that, where he doesn't play well with others, so you kind of understand. Both mistakes were made on both sides. Like if they had more open dialogue, if there had been better communication between the two of them, a lot of the issues that occurred wouldn't have occurred.
Exactly, which makes them equal.
Exactly.
Right. I guess my point is, in the actual operation in the cowl, I don't know that she's any weaker than he is. He has his issues. She has hers, which, to your point, are due to the fact that she's a younger Batgirl in this whole sequence. In the cowl, I'm defending her because I actually quite like Batgirl a lot in the cowl in these sequences, and I think he's hard on her in ways that make him look like a jerk. So I'm more admonishing Batman than I am her, is what I'm saying. She made some mistakes, but here's the thing. If it wasn't for her training, she wouldn't have handled putting herself in the safe so he couldn't get to her. Like, right. She had ways to, you said it earlier, improvise, adapt, and overcome. So I liked her portrayal in those sequences. My problems are when they start putting this relationship dynamic between the two of them that doesn't belong there. Right. That's the part that diminishes her to me, is not Not her being a rookie, not her her actual operation as Batgirl. It's the Bat relationship that happened here. I'm like, why did they go this route?
If they wouldn't have had that in there, I think if they wouldn't have had the one scene where they, let's say it's going to come up pretty soon, where they had sex, I don't think we would have as much issues with this, because I love how Barbara's cutting into her friend about the yoga, and now she's continuing. This is the best. This is yoga. This is there is only one, and then she's going into how he's being a jerk to her, how he's treating her unfair. She's the best she's his best student, but he's not sitting there, not going to acknowledge it, and all that, and all these are viable complaints that she's having, that she is that good. And she should be getting the recognition, and I like those kind of that dynamic where they showed her, kind of being flustered. But once you kick it from the father-daughter, teacher-student relationship to lovers, you kind of lose something.
And this has been a Batman and Robin dynamic all the way through. I'm talking about the Batman acting as the mentor and them never being quite good enough that he would trust them in the field. And if something goes remotely wrong, they should be removed. But it's okay for something to go wrong with him. It's a fatal character flaw of Batman's on this end. Yeah. He brings them into this world. He trains them to be a part of this world. It's always his rules or the highway. Those dynamics are very true to Batman, and it's what he does with his male partners. The difference is when you put the relationship in it, the relationship starts to overtake what I think is a really interesting concept exploration. These are Batman's flaws. It's funny how I probably, if it was some character created for this and they had that same relationship, I would have zero issue.
Right.
The fact that it's Batgirl, I have a problem with it. I'm like, I felt like that was unnecessary and took away from an interesting exploration, because I quite liked the dynamic of Bruce and his partner there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It was a Batman-Robin relationship, but it wasn't Robin. And I liked how Barbara had brought her own vibe and groove to the story. And they could have just kept going with that. They didn't need to have that one final little twist in it. I think, and that's the thing where it threw me off. And I think that was the part where I was like, it's a good movie, but this one scene, and then another scene later on that also, I'm like, these two scenes, if they didn't have these two scenes, well, I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more.
Can we wait to get to those till we get to those scenes? Because here's what I don't want to miss. Paris Franz. There's one area where I want to talk to you about this character, because, the name's stupid. But there's a lot of stupid names in Batman. What happened with Paris, we saw the boat blow up here. I like that Paris had in place a way to escape. It's one of the reasons why I start to give a pass to what he did to Batgirl earlier on. He comes off as this kind of smarmy, kind of ladies' man early on, but the more you get to know him, the more you see that this guy is very calculating, and he's got a lot more skills to him and ambition to him than initially comes in his first impression. My impression of him in the first viewing versus my impression of him in the second viewing were very different.
Yeah. The guy definitely has got a level of strategery in him that, it does make him a good villain and a worthy adversary to the Bat family. And again, as I said, I threw out the comment of like kind of an amateur move, and I don't want to say amateur because he is tough. There is some skills with this guy and some intelligence, and as you said, it was good showing the fact that he had the tanks planned. He figured his uncle was going to make a retaliation. The laying out the trap for Batgirl, and an obvious trap, but actually it's a twofold trap. So it was kind of neat where Bruce is going after the one way, and Barbara goes, "Hey, it's really here." And so she's, diverting and going off again. And this is an area where if she and Bruce had had a better relationship, she would, instead of going off on her own to investigate the car, she would have called up Bruce and said, "Hey, you know what? I just remembered my first encounter with this guy wasn't at that warehouse. It was at the truck and that's where this, the trap is going to be." And again, but Bruce's character flaw, playing into it, and then Barbara's character flaw that she's got to prove to Bruce, and that's a character flaw that a lot of the Robins have had, where they got to prove something to Batman, and they kind of throw out the rule of approach it as a team, not an individual.
And Bruce is a control freak. I mean, let's be honest. That's one of the things with Bruce. It's a major character flaw of his. It always has been. It dwindles over time, depending on events that are currently happening in the Bat universe. Like, I think he's outgrown a lot of this. It's still a part of him, though. But I think the Bruce that we have now in comics has evolved past this to a certain extent. And that's why you've always got to put a caveat on that, because he's still Batman and still has that issue. Look at the way he's treating Superman currently in comics. The previous universe Superman in that. There is a certain level of him that it does not trust very easily, even those closest to him. So it's interesting to see how this plays out. But you're right, in this sequence, Barbara going off on her own is really a direct impact to the lack of relationship that they have because of Bruce. And that part is a fatal flaw in this. I do like how Paris Franz, we get to see a psychological warfare of him. He's going after her, but he's doing it in his mind in a way where he's laying out the right clues, putting her in the places that he wants her to go. She's falling for traps. I think I would have a greater issue with that if he wasn't able to pull the same thing on Batman. But he did. Yeah. So the guy does have an interesting skill set to him that's an interesting part of this whole thing.
Yeah, I know, but it was weird because looking again, this is like my third or fourth watching on this, and on one hand I'm like, yeah, but I still remember my first watching of this. I really felt she got played more than Bruce did. And in a way, you can't say, I don't want to argue that, saying because you're making valid points. He does later on ambush Bruce and really gets him pretty good. But this was a massive setup of her. And the way she's even written now, where Bruce is doing the fighting and she's kind of hiding behind the chair. And it took away from the strength that is Barbara, in my head, the strength that Barbara Gordon should be. And I understand it's a younger Barbara, younger and all that, but it did take away from just the power that was always back.
Wait a minute. When bullets are flying around, even Batman would hide behind objects and use stealth to take them down. So I guess I don't see her hiding behind the chair when Batman comes through. Here's the difference between those sequences. Barbara was following the clue. So she encountered him first. Yes, she fell into the trap, and Bruce said that she was going to do that, but he does the same thing. So I guess, villains lay out traps, and that's part of a foil. Bruce has fallen for them many times. Is it that Barbara fell for the traps, or is it that it was Paris Franz? I mean, are we letting the generic villain that was introduced in this overtake Barbara's skill set?
Exactly, and that's where I don't want to see Barbara get taken down by this new guy, by a rookie. He's a newbie. He's a new villain. He's a new in this universe, and I didn't want to see her get taken down by this guy. And in one hand, I don't want to say she was cowering behind the chair, but in a way, it did. I can understand people saying that was something that kind of like took away from her strength.
Here's the thing, though. Because I'm kind of going on something you said earlier. You liked the sequence where she had the hidden batarang ready to go when she was talking the guy down. She wasn't cowering behind the chair. She had a batarang ready to go. So I mean,
I know. But it's one of those, the positioning she was in. And, speaking of positioning.
Okay. Now, here's the sequence here. I actually liked when she was fighting with him on that. She got ticked. Then it went to this. This, I'm like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
This is where this fell apart for me here, because I'm like, oh no, because I actually, up until this point, I was all in. I'm like, this is good. It's a typical dynamic. Then they did this, and I'm like, oh, come on, you're really going here.
And and it was one of those really going there. I just. It was one of those. I knew it was coming because I'd read all the stuff online.
I didn't.
The one scene that kind of annoyed me. She took off her mask. You think back to when Bruce and Catwoman had their thing in the comic that everyone complained about. Bruce never took off the mask. There is that. You always have to have that protection of the secret identity.
No. He didn't want Selina to know who he really was. Yeah. This is different. Barbara and Bruce know who they are. So there's a little bit of a different relationship. Now, hang on. I'm not here's the thing.
Right.
She's taking off her mask out in the outdoors, too, which is a whole other issue. So I'm not arguing with you on that end. I'm just saying in comparison to Bruce and Selena, in the comic, in that question, Selena didn't know who he was.
Right. True. There is the big dramatic difference on that. And again, it's, you think back to, and even just like with Barbara, because one of the big complaints that people were saying she was pining after Bruce. And I really didn't take it as her pining as opposed to, again, is to her realizing that was stupid, realizing the mistake. But it's one of those weird conflicts going on inside your head. And these were the sequences where, it kind of, I don't know, again, she's, doing some cool stuff where, like she's about to flip this one really nasty guy.
But the reason why is where things are interesting here, because I actually agree with this. I have an issue with this. Like, she got all strong again watching Harvey Bullock on TV, but then she comes out and she's having this reaction because of her relationship with Batman. I'm like, this just doesn't fit the characters. It's the funny thing. If this had been some other character, actually, if it had been Selena,
yeah, I
would have been in a different place with this. The fact that it's Barbara and they did this, it just didn't. It's like, why did you go here?
Yeah, like that whole rooftop sequence where instead of instead of fooling around, if she had called them out on it, saying, "Hey, I'm not Jason, I'm not Robin," and they'd actually gone that route with it, even though technically death in the family occurred after, but in this universe, they're clearly making it that it happened, this happens after death in the family. So, if she had called him on that and gone that route and caused the rift between the two of them, this would be a dramatically different movie right now.
This sequence got weird too. I mean, here's the thing: it's well written based on what happened, but I wish what happened never happened, because this started to, I mean, like I'm watching this and I'm like, oh man, they got this weird dynamic between the two of them because of it. I actually liked that he was being overprotective of her. I don't like the reason that they went to it. It was enough that she was training under him the way that any other Robin had, and that they were going with it in that sequence. I actually liked that relationship because it's very true to Batman. I think my problem is you didn't need this.
Yeah. No, it's funny, the sequence where she's trying to get back in his graces, for me, and first time I watched it, I was like, okay, it wasn't trying to get back with Bruce. It was trying to get back to being Batgirl. Mm-hmm. And then you read stuff and you hear stuff and you're like, and that's one of the big criticisms. People are saying she was pining after. I'm like, and for me, and I still don't think she was pining.
I agree.
But again, it's one of those things I completely understand people's reaction towards it, because it is one of those things where, she has it. The way it's being laid out, you could very easily interpret it that way.
I looked at it as she was trying to get them back to the relationship they had before.
Right.
That it was an emotional reaction and that thing happened. The problem is that led to this whole dynamic. You open up a can of worms that here's the thing, as far as any traditional relationship, when you put this piece into it, it would go this route. The problem is that it went to this route with these two characters. Completely unnecessary. I think the dynamic and the exploration of this could have happened the same way. This sequence where Batman's Batmobile is getting blown up and these guys are coming to take him down. All of this is great. I actually really like this. Bruce is hurt here. Barbara sees this and she's reacting. She's, taking action. Very strong Batgirl moments here. I loved all of this. I'm like, why did you, in that one moment, you put a tone that's so unnecessary?
Yeah. Exactly, and it's funny because you think back.
By the way, he's hiding behind a box right here with a Batarang.
I know. But again, here's the thing, though, and again, the way he was hiding, it looked different.
No,
it looked like he was poised, getting ready for the attack.
So did
the way they had her hiding.
Hold on, you got to go back and look at that again. She was hiding back there with Batarang at ready.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know, you
got to look at it again. She was hiding back there with Batarang at ready. That I will defend.
Okay.
She totally was. It's the same sequence. If anything...
And it's funny, it is the same sequence because Batgirl's coming in and saving him.
Which he did the same thing for her.
To her, so yeah. So, I'll stand corrected on this one, and I'll give you this one that, this is the same kind of sequence. Batman got ambushed.
This is a great Batgirl sequence until this.
Yeah.
Because this is coming due to You've Ruined Everything, meaning the relationship between Batman and Batgirl. This put a tone on this that it didn't need. Because seeing her come in and rescue him was a great Batgirl moment. Shows her strength. She's actually the one who takes down Paris France.
Yeah.
So the guy that came and got her initially in the sequence, redemption's here. The rage reaction that she went to is not because of the darkness of Paris hurting people or having to see the death, of his uncle in front of him and that type of thing. It's this sequence that, really, this is coming off of a relationship between the two of them that never should have been put into play. Because otherwise, if you take that out of it, this was a great sequence.
Yeah. And they could have had her being mad at him for everything he was doing, not about ruining the relationship. It could have been about, the games he was playing, the mind games he was playing with her, and she started to snap, and that's, she started embracing the darkness. So, I think they could have dramatically done that. They could have kept that same violence, they kept that same reason for her to step down and step back because of darkness without having the sex thing in there.
Her looking out the window at the couple kissing. I mean, it's like they keep putting that tone back into it. Those are the only bits. If I was going to do a cut of this and fix it, I would take out the sex scene. I would take out that. Yeah. I wouldn't take out her losing it with Paris France.
Oh, God.
Because I think you could have made it off of the sense that she was trying to live up to the relationship with the mentor, and because of the fact that Batman kept pushing her away, she snapped to prove herself. Even her giving up being Batgirl, just kind of I can't lose who I am, because I think Barbara has that balance to her. I could see that being the case.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have an issue with that. This explains why she eventually left the role of Batgirl. I don't know. I just don't get why they did that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone during the panels really just asked him why, because there was such vim and viper and just hatred against them towards that scene that there was never any open dialogue or an open conversation as to why they chose that one scene, why they chose to go that route.
Can I clarify something too? Because I was jumping on you on a couple of sequences there. I do want to say something, because you're emotionally what you were sharing was a lot of the combat I had with myself. Yeah. Because I'm going to be honest with you, in my first viewing, I was 100% where you were with that. Now I'm defensive of her good bits in this, because as I watched it through over time, I began to be wow, there are really elements of a strong Batgirl story here in what they were doing. There's a few key sequences where they're small, but in isolation, if you take them out, you've really got some great Batgirl moments here where you see her develop as a character. She goes from, you talk about rookie mistake early on, well, we see her grow in this, where she actually is defending and saving her mentor, showing her worth. She one-ups everything in this sequence and rescues Batman. She takes down Paris France. I mean, talk about an ending of redemption for Batgirl. It was great. I don't know why. I don't know why they went this route.
Yeah, I know, and there was some. This really could have been just as I said, the premise of a cool Batgirl story, the reasoning why she steps down as Batgirl before going into Killing Joke. I think that idea was wonderful, and there are parts of this story that, again, they take out the one piece of the story. This would be a great story.
Yes.
It was just that one piece, and they could have kept every single thing else in this, not changed a word of dialogue or activity, except that one piece where, they kiss and they fool around, and I think if they take out that one piece, this is a great Batgirl story.
And so I do want to apologize because I know I was kind of jumping over those sequences. The reason why is, as I've gotten through my later watch-throughs, I'm like, well, I really want to see what pieces are wrong and what pieces I really valued. And I don't think, because I've seen people that have said, that this Batgirl story was rotten and all that. I'm like, well, no, you're ignoring some of the really great sequences. I think actually 90% of the time she was in the costume, she was pretty terrific for a young character. And talking about the rookie age and all that, I thought she was pretty terrific in those sequences. It was the pining piece I agree with. I don't think it's as excessive as people say, but it's a problem. And I do agree with the criticism of it being a problem, so I don't want to diminish that. As I was watching it through, I'm like, if you cut this out, if you cut this out, if you cut this out, you've really got, there's about 5 sequences that if you cut out, you got a pretty good Batgirl story there. That would have been a great introduction into this. as like extra material. I also have one other criticism with that, because now we're kicking into Killing Joke proper.
Yeah.
I almost wish the Batgirl bit had been an extra short added on, and they just did Killing Joke as a piece together.
See, actually, I'll disagree with that. I liked the idea of showing the Barbara before, giving us this. Again, if they had that one little segment, take that piece out. Everything else, I like showing why Barbara stepped down, why she's no longer Batgirl. Because in Killing Joke proper, she's already no longer Batgirl. She's already retired from the role. And they never really went into the whole story as to why she ever did that in Killing Joke. And I like the fact that they gave us that piece in front of the story, and they gave us to us. For me, it gives us a full story now. It gives us the beginning, the Killing Joke, and then the big ending. So I like this. Again, it was a good idea, and as you said, there was some good Batgirl story in there. There was just, again, one little piece that is and that one little piece overpowered everybody's conversation.
Here's what it takes away
everybody's
from,
discussion.
Jim, here's what it takes away from, though. You watch where he's going right now. Watch what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see right now what Killing Joke's really all about.
Yeah.
Which, it's not a Batgirl story.
True.
It's a Batman Joker story. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually, to your point, whether you put it in the beginning or as a short, I don't really care. So I'm not going against your argument. The one thing right now, though, is I think this conversation, and I'm not talking about you and me, I'm talking about globally, this conversation has taken away from what is a great Batman Joker story.
Yeah.
Because this is a story that's pretty pivotal in what it does. In '88, it introduced a Joker it upped the game. Because the Joker went from being this kind of silly character to being dark, creepy, calculating, and psychotic. I mean, this is a scary Joker in this. You see this sequence where he's talking about, I've been thinking about you and me lately, and how this is going to end, and this idea that, one of us is going to end up killing each other. And this is how Killing Joke, the graphic novel, opened up. It was a Batman Joker story. So I love all the Batgirl bits for the reasons you're talking about as far as predating this, other than the critical sequences that we're talking about. But it does, when you see people having a conversation all about Batgirl on this, it's taken away from, this is a Batman Joker story. It really is. It's the yin and the yang against each other, where Batman's like, listen, you and I are the yin and the yang of each other. We really are the antithesis. This battle between the two of us, there's only way it's going to end is one of our death. I don't want that. And is there a way we can find a peace? Can I help you get past what's going on with you, so maybe we don't have to do that? Is this destiny, or is there a way for us to prevent this? Can we work together to do that? And it's an interesting story concept, which is really the discussion we should be having now. Is Bruce right in doing this? What would you do in this situation? It's your mortal enemy. You see where this is going. Years and years of this kind of battling between the two of you that's only escalating. Because we see this as a psychotic story where it's escalating further and further. These dentists that were found and things like that. The Joker's situation's getting worse. He's trying to prove a point, to the point where he's killing people and, taking the commissioner hostage and doing all of this. It's an interesting sort of premise to kind of go off of here, and it's overshadowed by what they did with the Batgirl sequence.
I know, it's the neat concept of Bruce, going, I gotta make sure I at least I've done everything I can to rehabilitate you. And I like that notion that Bruce would, after all the evil this man has done, all the people he's killed and just all the nastiness he does, he still is trying to find a way. And I think that is something that does get lost in the shuffle, even when you're talking Killing Joke.
Sure.
Because when you're talking Killing Joke proper, you always talk about how, what happens to Barbara, the torturing of Gordon, the fact that Bruce doesn't go over the line, even though the torturing. But even before the torture, even before the nastiness, you get this notion of Bruce trying to save the Joker, and again, even like with the Joker origin, how it's this is a quote unquote origin, one of the many origins of the Joker. There's so many different things that happen, so many different Joker and Batman elements in this story that it's one of those reasons that it is so beloved.
Now, this story was written to be a one-shot graphic novel that was not meant to be in continuity.
Yeah,
it was meant to be like Alan Moore's stamp on, this is kind of my Batman Joker story. So it wasn't meant to be what it turned into, where because of its popularity, it was one of those stories that, okay, this one shot that we did is so popular that now we're going to bring it into canon and do something with it.
And I love how even way back when they're telling this Joker origin story, he says, I like to have multiple options on the story. Maybe this is what happened. And again, it was a really great way to keep, the mystery of who the Joker is. This is an origin, but is it real? You really don't know. And that's always been the big argument of the Joker.
Sure.
Is he crazy, or is he just this monster and he pretends to be crazy? Who is the real Joker?
Yeah, and that's a tricky part to this whole thing, because you're right. I actually like how you worded that. This is a story of who is the Joker? Who is he really? And I like that mystery of this whole thing. I liked this as an origin, though, because as the time when I read this, it wasn't like one of those things where it was real popular to have like one-shots that weren't tied into continuity. This is a pretty big story. I'm like, interesting Joker story, an interesting origin. I actually took this to be the origin, because they never tell his name. Like, you never know what his name was before. It just kind of gives a little background to the whole thing. I do like in recent years how they've explored this idea that through the Joker's unique brand of crazy, he has fashioned various versions of his origin. I actually like the movie The Dark Knight handled that as well, with the Joker. This sequence at the carnival with the Let's Shake, I so knew where this was going when I read it in the comic book. Man, did they do and this is something that I haven't heard talked about a lot. As an animated film, Brian Boland's artwork is absolutely stunning. If you're going to try and mimic a guy's artwork and do a good job with it, I thought as far as for an animated sequence, they did a really good job of capturing Brian Boland's art. I mean, it's not his. If you hold up the comic to it, I mean, it's hard to master Brian Boland's art. But they do a great job of thematically capturing the imagery that Brian Boland put on the table.
Well, and I'll agree with you. They captured the imagery that he created. But I so loved, and I know you loved his artwork in Killing Joke. So I'm saying something you're going to completely agree with me. I wish there was some way they could have brought it more in here. And again, I'm speaking, I have no idea on the technical side of it, but I so loved that artwork that I wish they could have brought it in. They did bring in a couple of the images, like when Joker first becomes the Joker, they really captured what he drew, but there was so many different times, like with Gordon and Bruce, and even this sequence in the cave between Alfred and Bruce, where you see more emotion in the artwork in the comic, that you can capture and animate. And it's, again, I don't know the technical side of it. I don't know if it's possible, but I wish there was some way they could have done a different art style for this series, for this movie.
Can I say, and I'm not going to challenge a single thing you're saying, because I'm with you. I actually think that they did a great job considering they're not Brian Boland. Right. But I would have loved it to be verbatim Brian Boland's artwork. Here's a sequence where, you said something earlier about like the beginning part being a prequel to this. You know what I wish it had been? You know the sequence with the pictures of the Joker up at the top? I would have loved a kind of history of Batman versus the Joker in that beginning. Not that don't get me wrong, I liked the elements of the Batgirl segment that I was defending, and that's one of the reasons why I got to the point that I was defending them. This is not a Batgirl story. Right. It's not. It's a Batman versus the Joker story. Now, I love Barbara, so putting her at the beginning, and I defended those sequences. I liked her fight with Paris Franz. The issues that are out there that people didn't like, I'm talking about her pining over Batman, I think overshadowed what was otherwise some very terrific sequences. This is one of the most uncomfortable sequences in comics.
Yes,
right
coming
here.
up.
It was uncomfortable when I read it as a kid, in 89, or 88, I should say. It's uncomfortable here to see it. And, oof.
I think they did a pretty good job with this sequence. Again, just the opening of the door and that first look. I loved the look on her face and just that creepiness of his face. That is just this is one of the sequences they did really well capturing from the original artwork. And just going through, she shot, the pain, just the slow motion fall, blood splatter on Gordon, just the way she's laying there, just in agony, and just, a gut wound is extremely painful. And I loved this was, again, I hate using the word love, but it is something that this was a really creepy, cool sequence.
And this is what I meant earlier when I was saying I think they did as good a job as they possibly could in capturing what Brian Bolland brought to life in the artwork and Alan Moore did in the writing. This sequence is just as creepy as it was in the comic, and that's very hard to do because that's amazing artwork, and keeping as close to it as they possibly could. I mean, even him in this ridiculous outfit adds to the creep factor. When you see him in that dark sequence in the beginning, and he's doing these bits, it's just plain horrid what's going on. And seeing what's happening to Jim Gordon in the background, it's just a horrid sequence. I actually appreciated the film's choice to tone this down a little bit. Now, you're going to say, what am I talking about? There's actually further nudity in the comic that isn't featured in this film.
Right.
When there's the sequence where Jim Gordon later on is on the, train ride, and they actually tone it down a bit, ever slightly.
Right.
And I actually am like, yeah, there's no reason to, I mean, they basically established the fact that she was without her clothing. Now, what more do we need?
And I agree with you. And it was funny because when I didn't read this when it first came out. I read Killing Joke later on in life, and I remember when I first read Killing Joke, that sequence was like, oh my God. And then one of the big debates that I've heard people comment on from Killing Joke is what exactly does the Joker do to her? Does he just strip her down and take pictures, or does he take it a moment too far? Take it a step further. And I think that is something that in the comic book, I thought that was a neat creep factor that it could get you thinking, what exactly did the Joker do to her? How far does he take it? And what exactly is Gordon seeing in those pictures? Is he seeing something beyond just, his daughter shot, sprawled out there, or is there something else he's seeing? I think that for me was always this creepy extra factor in that. And
it's the same thing here.
But here's the one thing I'm wondering, and this is a comment I've heard from people, and I didn't think this in my head, when I was watching it, but it was something I saw. I saw online and heard from conversations with people about, did this movie, because of the previous sexual scenes and because of something that goes on later on with the Joker, did they make it more obvious, or did they make it more prominent that yes, he did do something?
No, it's just as nebulous. It's the same sequence. I agree with you. That's how I read it. That's how when I watched it, that's how I saw it. I still had that same mystery in my head. But again, that's one of the things that I think that, again, going back to that sex sequence before, and again, it's, some of it is, just verbal, just hearing the voice as opposed to reading it and things like that. Did they take this to another level that they didn't need to do? Well, here's the thing. That's in that sequence in the beginning that predates this whole sequence here.
Right.
As far as what the Joker does to her, there is nothing in this film that is any more indicative of that than there was in the graphic novel. It's pretty much verbatim what it was in the graphic novel. If anything, this tones it down a little bit more in the sense that let's just say it doesn't show her boob,
right,
which they do in the comic. And I'm not saying that to be crude. I'm just saying that's the missing part in this. So as far as your same logic leap, anybody who's got that criticism of this would have the same criticism of the original graphic novel for that sequence. I think they're connecting two things that you can't connect, because it's not Batman that had anything to do with this. It's the Joker. So I think you're very valid to read into that and assume that because of how psychotic and twisted he is. I think you were valid to read into that in the comic. I think you were valid to read into it here, but it's still nebulous. We don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's weird because on one hand, I completely agree with you because, again, when I watched this movie, I didn't think they went too far with that. I felt I had the same creep level that I had before.
Right.
But, when you add, again, when you start throwing out the sexualization of the Bat family, sexualization in the Bat universe, that's where you're opening the door to something else.
Well,
and it could be reading into it. I don't know. And it is one of the it's one of those kind of situations where I don't want to say yes or no because it's how people are interpreting this now and how people are seeing it. And I can't tell somebody your interpretation's wrong because it's how you feel.
Well, I can, in the sense, here's what I'll say they're wrong. If you look at the original graphic novel and say it's less of an indication in that than there is here, the original graphic novel showed more. So if you're going to go there in your head, you look at the original graphic novel, they actually showed and clarified in the original graphic novel, not just verbally, but through pictures, that she was completely undressed. So I agree. It added to the creep factor and the fact that, he could have possibly gone there. And that's a whole other issue we could talk about, because in 1988, when they were kind of exploring this kind of violence against a female character, this was something that predated what he did to Jason Todd. This was the Joker going to a whole new level, and she's saying that. She's basically saying, what's he going to do? He's taking this new level. It's not the same. He's snapped to a whole different level. And what he does here to the dad, to Jim Gordon, talk about uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable graphic novel, and they captured this pretty much verbatim. What they were doing. I don't think the beginning part. I think the beginning part was completely unnecessary. That particular sequence, it's funny thinking through your kind of objections earlier, saying that part was kind of a neat way to get to see Batgirl beforehand. I don't have an argument with you on that. I actually like prequels. I like seeing information that came before. I guess I would have liked to have seen it as a short, only because of the fact it would have closed that off and then started this new story in that same world. But that's a personal preference. That doesn't mean you're wrong in the way that you liked it. My problem is still, and this is where you and I are completely in sync, you didn't need to have that sequence between the two of them. And I don't think it ruins this or, takes away from that part, other than the fact that it added a whole thing into this dynamic that was not necessary. You can really fast forward this movie and you're getting Killing Joke.
Yeah. And it's weird because, one of the things when I watched this, I hadn't read Killing Joke in a while. So I was going into it more with a fresh perspective on it, that I didn't remember all the details. I didn't actually remember how Killing Joke started. Mm-hmm. I couldn't remember if there was. I knew the barber story was all new, but I didn't know how the real proper started. I didn't know the real proper started when he went to see the Joker, that initially opening. Right. So I didn't know exactly what was new, what wasn't new, but there was I don't know. It just, and then when we get to this sequence of where Joker is, basically initiating the torment of Jim Gordon. Again, this whole part of it, I didn't know how much of this was Killing Joke, how much of this was new, how much was proper, and and what was before and what was done now. And I did remember though the torture sequence. I do remember what's coming up where he's going to start seeing the images, and these were some of the stuff that stood out. And again, it was one of those things where I'm sitting there watching this, going, yeah, this is kind of creepy. This is kind of something like, what the heck is going on here? But I do remember when I first read this, there was a more, oh my God, feeling in reading the book.
Why do you think they felt there was a need for, pardon me. Why do you think they felt there was a need for the overall Batgirl sequence in the beginning? And it's funny on this one, I'm like, normally I cut off a cough and stuff like that. I'm like, I can't this time because we're following along with the film. Actually, editing this is going to be different because I can't really cut out pauses or things like that because we're following along with the film.
I think they wanted to, and it's funny because I think what they wanted to do was tell a Batgirl story. Tell something do something they hadn't done and give her, and I think their intention was to give us a good Batgirl story, to give us this, because I think it kind of went, the best of intentions, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. And I think that's what we got here, because I honestly and truly believe they did not want to belittle Batgirl. They didn't want to belittle Barbara or strong female characters or any of the negative criticism that we're getting on this. I don't think they wanted to do any of that. I think their intention was to, hey, Killing Joke's a smaller story, so let's beef it up a little bit and give people a really good Batgirl story. Show her, triumphing, and show her beating the bad guy, and everything you were pointing out of, how kind of the redemption of Barbara. But it was just that, again, we go back to that one scene, I think, through the hiccup, and it got people going, what? People weren't, you didn't see the forest for the trees.
See, and I guess that's part of my problem here is I'm watching this right now, this sequence, and I feel like, look at that. We keep going back to this discussion about Batgirl. We've got more of the Joker origin here, which is really well done. I think what we've got here in front of us is a terrific Killing Joke adaptation that, is the graphic novel brought to life. Why didn't they just stick to that?
And you got Mark Hamill, doing the voice. You got,
yes.
And again, I even liked how you can hear, because it's not his real voice he uses for the Joker. He does tweak some stuff, but you're hearing the kind of moments where it is the Joker voice coming out for this guy, and sometimes it's not. Then it is, and it isn't. Then it is. It's got the kind of sound to his voice that he uses for the Joker. Sometimes he brings it up, and sometimes it's more muffled and it's more calm. And again, when I first read the comic, I felt bad for this guy because he's like, "Hey, I'm not going to do it. My wife just died. That was the reason for me doing this." We're you don't have a choice, buddy. Yeah, and it was funny. Just those mob bosses, the goon, not mob bosses. They were just goons, but just them, their attitudes hey, feel bad for you, pal, but you're going to do it anyways. And I still, even when I saw this, and still go back to that memory of going, "Oh, poor guy."
See, and here's the thing. This is kind of the reason why I said I wanted it as a short, and I'm not trying to do this to win an argument with you. I don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
I think what I would have loved is the Killing Joke done as its own succinct piece, and then do a great Batman and Joker animated short. Do a great, well put together Batgirl animated short. Have them set in the same world, for the purpose of fleshing out what these characters were doing predating this whole sequence. Yeah. But this story in and of itself, it really is an ending of one movie and the beginning of another. Because even her narrative, she was narrating the first part. She's done. Yeah. She's no longer narrating this story. It turns into this whole story. So even the narrator now has completely vanished from this and gone to this battle. There's zero connection to the previous story other than the fact that Batgirl's in this and gets, paralyzed.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't understand still the point. And its placement isn't really its issue for me. So, you liking it as far as an introductory, or liking the concept of it, I should say, because we have the same issues with it, as an introductory piece, isn't really my problem. It's kind of I'm wondering the why. Why was that necessary?
It does take away from a Batman Joker story. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, we're coming up to it's also the torture sequence. Oh,
yeah. Oh, this is, but remember, this is a bookended story too, and we'll talk about it at the end because the book ending at the beginning and the end is lost because of the fact they put stuff before.
Yeah. Now,
this is so creepy.
Again, well done Joker stories where you have that combination of this creep and oh my god factors, and even. I don't want to say humor, but there is, because that is kind of that Joker, and you've got just, with Joker just completely just destroying, mentally, trying to destroy mentally Jim Gordon. And going through that, it's a major part of Killing Joke where he tries to break Gordon, but Gordon is just that, and it's one of those cool things about Gordon that he holds on to the line. He holds the line. He is a true police officer. He is a true servant of justice, and I love seeing strong Jim Gordon stories. And right here, you're getting a Jim Gordon who's being tortured, Jim Gordon who is being broken, and you can see sometimes him physically getting broken and just going down, but you see him try to fight back. You see him rise up. up. And I do like the sequences here, especially because it's got the strength, weakness, sadness, sorrow, and all the different emotional spectrum it goes through.
And the Joker basically trying to show that his world of chaos is the better way.
Yeah.
Batman's a hypocrite. How is he, in his illegal ways, allowed to do this? Is he the instigator of all this? And is he the one wronging everybody else by his actions? It's interesting to see the philosophy of the Joker. He's so trying to sell his world. He's the ultimate salesman right now. He's trying to sell his world to Jim Gordon. The crazy way's better, because how does this world make sense? You got a guy running around in a bat cape beating people up? How is that right? Why are we okay with that, but then my brand of loony's not okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting debate that's going on here.
We got right now a sequence where Bruce is interrogating people and he's talking to these prostitutes about the Joker, and you find out usually when the Joker breaks out, he gets a little bit freaky. That's one of the sequences I really did not like, because in a way it humanizes Joker. It gives him kind of like a base human reaction that you or I would have, and or regular everyday, a quote unquote normal person could have. And it also, once again, it brings in the sexualization inside this universe. And I think it just it was a sequence, again, another sequence they didn't need to have.
Was that in the original comic?
Well, the original comic had a single panel showing Bruce talking to it was obviously street workers, and obviously, but it was just a single small panel. And actually, when first time I reread Killing Joke, I missed the panel because I was like, did he do that? I don't think he does it. And then I went back through a second time on my art read through, and that's when I noticed the one single small panel. It's when he's busting heads and trying to find out where Gordon is and where the Joker is, that it is, and it's kind of a small panel. So in this, it's kind of a fleshed out version of what it is. But it's the same in the book.
But wasn't it the same thing that he did meet the girls?
Again, yes. But again, I think the added dialogue is one of the things that I didn't like it. If it had just been the same like how it was in the book, where there wasn't any dialogue, it was just him, showing a picture to them. Or just a kind of a quick boom boom, I wouldn't have had an issue. Okay,
so they didn't go into the fact that he actually was with them,
right? Not in the book.
Okay,
it was just a single quick panel showing Bruce talking to them, but you didn't see what they said, and I liked how that was handled better than, oof. Right as we're talking, the torture of Barbara Gordon is popping up. And I tell you, again, the comic book for me was creepier on how they did this, but just seeing Gordon just being tormented this way, it does have a kind of a, oh, man.
It does. It is funny framing this up with the I go loony. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't know how to take that sequence.
Oh, it just shows he's crazy. I mean,
yeah, I know.
It didn't ruin it for me. It's here's the thing: once you go to those that sequence is just as creepy as it was in the comic. Yeah, because it's brought to life. It's visualized in this. The Joker is a freak, and this is what it really. I think what people are forgetting that are being overly critical of the Killing Joke sequences is this is proving that Joker is a depraved creep. And during this era in '88, you got to remember this is the era in this year. This is the same year that he kills Jason Todd. And when he kills Jason Todd, he beats him up with a crowbar again and again and again and again. Because that's just how twisted he has become. So, I mean, look at this sequence. He's broken Jim Gordon to the point where, he's got Jim Gordon riding around naked in a train car. I mean, this is creepy and depraved.
Yeah, and it's again, as I said, it's the physical and emotional and just mental breakdown of Gordon that was like, oh man, because he is Jim Gordon. For Joker to do that was just one of those kind of oh my god moments. And it's funny jumping from past to present, and I liked how in the animated series they're changing the coloring for the past sequences.
Yes.
But they're still keeping a good enough red, because if you remember from the original, they kept a strong red color. It was a black and white kind of sequencing with a strong red color in when they did these back sequences, and they're still keeping us with a nice red tint to it. So again, I like how they're doing these sequences with the back and forth.
I wish they'd been able to keep the Batmobile the same as it was in the Killing Joke graphic novel, because it had that very cool front to it. When you were talking about the art sequence earlier, that because it drove in, it had that huge, like it almost looked like something out of the original Batman comics from the past.
Yeah, like the giant symbol on the front there.
Yeah, it was really cool. I love the art styling of this, but that part was, to your point about some of the artwork earlier, that I wish they'd kept.
Yeah, again, I know, and it's it's one of those things I don't know how to do that stuff, or if it's even possible to take that. And I think part of it is just, and we both agree 100% on just how awesome how awesome the original artwork was. It was that creepy, beautiful that you need in a really great Joker story. That you and actually, when you're telling like a horror story, you need to have that kind of creepy, beautiful to it. And the original Killing Joke captured it. The animated series, they did a really good job with it, and so I'm not knocking any animation. And I don't know the technical side if it's possible, but it did. This is one of the things that did fall short of the original, and I don't think you could have ever even captured that original side. So again, I'm knocking it, but I don't want to come across as negative or being hateful or mean towards it, because this is still creepy, beautiful stuff. And especially like with this red tint, as the Red Hood is looking through the mask and he's seeing Batman for the first time, and just all this creep factor that we are getting. There is some neat stuff here visually in the story being told. Yeah,
I mean the artwork here, and I honestly, it's only because you're comparing it to Brian Boland artwork.
I know,
this
exactly.
This is a very pretty animated movie.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the actual talent that's associated with it, it's hard to follow up on Brian Boland. I mean, oof. But I do think that the animation artist did an impeccable job of making that work.
Yeah, and this sequence coming up right here where we first see the Joker's face. This is one of those sequences, along with when Barbara got shot. I absolutely loved how they captured it. They did a beautiful job.
And the voice, and hearing, Mark Hamill twist into, Joker mode and this whole thing. I thought really, really dark, especially I was a big fan of Batman the Animated Series. And I love how this feels like the next evolution of because that was in itself a very mature series for the time. I like that this feels like a sequel to that of sorts. In the sense that they're doing things that are like the next level from that. If anything, that really should be the prequel to some of this.
Yeah, no, it's funny when you get in like the sequence where we see Bruce doing his thing, and it is always something I do like seeing, just how he approaches, and it's his head's on a swivel and he's fighting, he's in combat mode, but you do get that, okay, he's at this calm level, he's so calm that he's going to seriously hurt somebody. And it's that when you get somebody who's, amped up for a fight, that's going to be a tough person. But when you get someone who's just so at a level of, I'm perfectly calm and at rest, they're that much more dangerous. Because all these Joker minions, they're all like, all right, all pumped up and attacking him, and you just see Bruce just one by one, bam, 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 just taking them down. It was something it's one of the things I do like about animated series and seeing this, that when you see the combat, when you see the fighting sequences, and this was one of those, it was a really well played out, really well done, just again, bringing the comic to life.
It's funny how this sequence at the end, I was looking at comparing to the comic, what happened there. And I wish they'd done more inside the funhouse with him chasing down the Joker, the way that it all played out. But they did a pretty good job of reenacting this. Because this is a great example of where you're now trying to take that great Brian Boland art in the action sequence. Because they added in more of the minions to this particular fight sequence than they did previously.
Right. Yeah, I know. And Wolf guy. Again, it's sometimes when you get a Bruce fighting, when you get the Batman fighting, it's kind of hard to imagine that somebody could get an edge on him because how great he is. But this is one of those sequences where you can understand the damage he's taken. You can see it just playing out.
Wow, this part I give you the average man, and kind of putting him on display. It's a tough sequence. This really is, as far as I remember reading Killing Joke and really loving it so much because it was so disturbing. And which sounds like a strange thing to say, but when you'd been used to comics that stayed away from mature topics, in '88 this was cutting edge.
Oh, big time.
Especially with a main superhero character like this.
Hey, I still remember, because I'm trying to remember when I read it a lot later. I think I read it in college. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But, even then, even later on, it still was an oh my God moments of, just the torture of Gordon, what happens to Barbara, just everything going on. And then you get that really cool hoorah moment where Gordon's like, take him down, buy the book. Make sure he knows he didn't, it's like, make sure he knows our way still works. Our way is the way to go. And I love just that moments where Gordon is just giving it, telling Bruce, hey, this is it, man. You gotta toe the line. And I'm always one of those guys who says, why doesn't Batman kill the Joker? Right here, Killing Joke answers that question. I always, that's one of the things I love about Killing Joke.
The one thing that really, it's funny, I noticed it more in this one, and I think it's because of the Batgirl sequences in the beginning. Batgirl's been paralyzed because of the Joker. Her dad's like, bring him in by the book.
Yeah.
Batman, who had a moment with her earlier on in this, is going along with that.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. It's to like to stick it to the Joker that he didn't break Jim Gordon down and things like that. But I don't know. There comes a point where I'm like, I don't know. I would be okay with the two of them, especially after the opening sequence going after him. It is kind of funny that, like, we've got to show him. I don't know that you need to anymore.
Well, that'd be a dramatically different movie if Bruce just walks up to the Joker, pulls out a gun, and shoots him. Like, wait, what the heck just happened? That would, here's the thing: which would get more anger from the viewers? Him if he just pulled out a gun and shot Joker, or the sex scene from earlier?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting sequence. I gotta tell you, the carnival sequences, because I like circuses and stuff like that, but the way they turn, because you hear stories about people being afraid of clowns and things all the time, and I get that. When you take this circus world and twist it like this and make it like this dark carnival, it is one of the creepiest things that I think you can see. They really did a great job of capturing this. I love this upside down room and the way the Joker's pulling like the chair that's stuck to the whole ceiling and bashing him over the head with it. I mean, this was a really clever sequence right here. Because he's pulling all like the pan. I mean, this is really a clever sequence of events that they've done here. I do feel bad that this movie's like there's so many great sequences in this that were really well done. I do feel bad it's overshadowed by like some bizarre choices.
Yeah,
because as an adaptation of Killing Joke, it's really awesome.
One sequence kind of took some craziness, and again, little subtle stuff like where Joker had the electric joy buzzer, and Bruce saw it coming, so he was able to block it before he actually could hit him with the buzzer and actually breaks it, so Joker can't use it. It's just little moments like that. And again, great fight choreography and just how the action's laid out. And even just again, realization of between Joker and Bruce about the nature of being crazy. Everybody goes through the torment. Everybody has those moments, but it's the Joker who is broken, not everybody else. There's something that with the Joker about, that made him break. It's not human nature to break and go crazy and do all the nastiness that Joker does.
Yeah. It's the battle between the two of them. I think this is no matter how many times I see it, when you really do a Batman, because you think about, Scott Snyder just did some really great exploration of Batman versus the Joker in his run. And so many, I mean, by just saying Scott Snyder, you're ignoring so many that have come before. So I don't want to do that, but I think he's one of these characters, when you do the stories right, where you put these two tete-a-tete with each other, it's like seeing a great Superman versus Lex Luthor, right? There's certain characters going up against each other that you want to see. Wonder Woman, Cheetah. There's certain characters that are, just you want to see them battle each other. Captain America and the Red Skull. I mean, these are moments that when they're done right and you don't overdo them, they're powerful because you've seen them fight so many times. You find it hard to believe that somebody can find yet another way to make it interesting. And this is incredibly interesting because Bruce is pleading with him. It doesn't have to go this way. I can help you. I don't know that I'd want to help him right now after what he did, but, teach their own.
Again, it stands to Bruce's character. The no-kill code. This right here is the ultimate test of this. Well, this and then later on with when he kills Jason Todd is the ultimate test of the no-kill code. And it's always the Joker who gives him that ultimate test of it. And I like the fact that Bruce goes up to the abyss. He doesn't step over the edge. And, pulling back that line from earlier in the movie, there is that darkness that once you cross that line, you can never cross it back. Once you're over, that's it. And that's always been the fundamental of why Batman doesn't kill. And again, it's an exploration and a theme in The Killing Joke that was one of those really cool moments. In, again, answering the question, why doesn't the Batman kill the Joker? Well, you're seeing it. It's you can't cross over that line. Once you reach that point, you can't take it back.
Yeah, it's really an interesting issue with this one. It's this joke at the end is so ridiculous. This only works if you look at the beginning of Killing Joke and then they bookend it at the end, where Bruce is pleading with this guy, like, don't make me do this. Don't put me in a position where I'm eventually going to have to cross the line with you and kill you. I don't want to go there. It doesn't have to. Which is interesting when you take a look at Dark Knight Returns, where he had to do that at the end, years later. So it's interesting to see Alan Moore exploring that same theme with these two of, this is where our inevitable path's going to go. And both are stories that, in their intention, Dark Knight Returns was not meant to be canon. Killing Joke was not meant to be canon. They were meant to be these writers' interpretation of this. To a certain extent, this is Brian Azzarello's interpretation of Killing Joke, and I get that. It's such a great cast, because we're looking at the closing credits right now, and it was such a great cast putting on these characters. They really brought them to life, and I think did justice to Killing Joke as the graphic novel was originally intended. The choices at the beginning really puzzle me, and not all of it though. Right. Because here's the thing, I'm still saying to myself, like, Jim's right. Some of those sequences at the beginning were super. I was arguing how cool they were, and you're like, well, they're great when you have them there. Here's a part with this part that's interesting. Oracle. Yeah. Because it was your niece, Cassie, who pointed out a lot of people attribute Killing Joke to the invention of Oracle, and it was actually John Ostrander who did it in Suicide Squad, which is very true. Killing Joke was one of those things, the story was so popular, though, that they brought into continuity the idea that Barbara Gordon lost the ability to walk. So Killing Joke, because of its popularity, did set the stage for this. John Ostrander, and I don't know, I guess I never looked at Killing Joke as being the start of Oracle. I looked at it as being the event that allowed for Oracle because of how powerful the story was. I'm a big Oracle fan, so I always thought it was cool that they chose to bring this into continuity.
And I read Killing Joke after Oracle was already around.
Okay. So,
for me, Oracle already existed. So when I read Killing Joke, I'm like, oh, okay, this is how she gets in the chair. Oh, okay, cool. So I always did associate the two together. But again, as I said, I read this stuff after everything was done. So, but I personally like the fact that they put it in here. But again, it wasn't the Killing Joke that created it. It was Ostrander who said, "Hey, what they did with Barbara." He's like, he saw a story. He saw a way to use this in the story,
which is cool.
I know, and you got to give the guy full props and full credit for that. Just to take this story that was gaining popularity, was going to become canon, was already in canon. He's like, hey, let's continue her story. I can do something with this story. I love when you see that kind of stuff. And then Oracle just became this powerhouse of, on her own. From there, you got the Birds of Prey, the Batgirl and the, Oracle and the Birds of Prey and all that, and everything that just went through there. Just the usage to the point where when they finally brought Barbara back to walking, there was a lot of people who didn't like that. Because they're like, hey, no, she's such a great character in the chair. You can't take away Oracle from us. I think that is kind of an interesting fact that you go from what was this horrible tragedy to creating this character, then building on this character. And for me, that strength of that character is Barbara Gordon. That's always going to be for me, just that, but it's the end version of Barbara who went through all this torment, who went through all this.
One of our listeners asked me what I thought of this, and I didn't answer. Other than the fact he asked me first if I saw it, and then he asked me what I thought of it. And I deliberately didn't answer because of the fact I didn't want to reveal my thoughts on this one until we had this conversation. Here's the problem. I thought this was a really good movie that could have been great, and I think it's one of the reasons why I said earlier I wish the Batgirl bit had been as short, because how I measure greatness is how likely am I to watch it over and over again? Because there's movies that fall into the geeky great category where you're like, I will watch that again and again. Killing Joke, just because it's one of my favorite Batman stories of all the time, and I really can take a look at that story. I read it again and again from time to time, just because it's such a landmark piece, right? It set a tone. I read it in '88 when it first came out, so and that may be a different context that I have. I remember reading it when it came out and being blown away by how different it was than anything else that had been previously published about it. This, with some of the choices that they made in this one, with the Batgirl sequence in the beginning, it took away from my rewatchability of this. Not that I won't rewatch it, but I won't rewatch it as much as I would have. And that's a distinction for me in this one. I don't know where you're at, though, if you feel the same way. I feel it was really good. It could have been great.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that as well. It was a good movie, but two scenes for me. If they take out those two scenes, it would be a lot better. It would be a great movie. And the watchability, as I said, I've watched this a couple times now. Just get ready to talk about this, and also wrap my head around what I think about this. My first initial gut reaction was a lot different than now. I was a lot harder on it in my first watch through. But now it's more of I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they're doing. But I don't really see me watching this again. And I hate to say that because, again, I love Killing Joke. And maybe if I watch this, I may fast forward through the beginning part. And do it that way, and just actually skip over and get to what is Killing Joke proper and start watching from there on and watch that. Because again, that was, but I don't even want to say I do that because I don't know. It's tough. My initial reaction was, I'm never going to watch this again, probably. Now that I've watched it for the show, I'm probably never going to watch this again. That's my initial gut reaction.
See, and I don't know that that's going to be the case for me, but we're not too far off because of the fact that I do know, here's the thing. I liked some of those Paris France sequences in the beginning where we got to see, where I thought Batgirl stepped up. And I really liked those sequences. The problem is you, got to go through the other stuff to see those. And that's what really, and there's such short sequences, I'm like, I don't know, that just ruins the tone so much. And then that has nothing to do with Killing Joke. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. It has nothing to do with it at all. So Killing Joke, when you watch that, I'm like, I probably would fast forward and watch it again. I feel, I don't want to say I feel bad that I'm in this place because I didn't create it. I think there's so much good here that it really bothers me. The bad sequences, I think, are harder to deal with in this, or the bad choices are harder to deal with in this. Because I think, here's the thing, I think there's so much good here. I really do think there's a lot of really good, I think the adaptation of Killing Joke is stellar. I don't think the sequences with the girls that were the streetwalkers, at least for me, in isolation, change anything. to this film, other than it does make the Joker a little freakier. Okay, but to your point, if you start adding him into the sequences earlier, it's kind of like, okay, why do we keep going here? I don't know that we need to. There's a couple unnecessary things. I don't think that ruined Killing Joke. I think the beginning part ruined that.
Right, and yeah, exactly. If we didn't have that beginning part, I wouldn't have thought twice about that.
Agreed.
You know, but because, again, this whole thing with that opening, that first sexual sequence, really, it added the sexual element to Batgirl. It added the sexual element to Batman, and it took it opened up the world to a different kind of interpretation of sequences. You know, like when Bruce is first told about how she was found, you know, in a state of undressed. You know, it's the exact same dialogue in the book, but for some reason, hearing it, the voice had, to me, just a little bit more of a creep factor to it.
I'm a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and I've mentioned this on the show in previous episodes. Sometimes there's artists that are, and storytellers that will throw the stuff right in your face and they spell everything out for you. In the case of this one, they show you a lot. And I'm talking about the original Killing Joke graphic novel, but they also leave certain elements of it nebulous, and that's creepier. You're left to fill in the blanks of, we see the Joker do his little initial step before the pictures, then everything goes off camera. We see the pictures later when Jim's going through in the train, but you still don't really know what all did that look like. How long did that go on? What did that mean? That's far creepier than having it spelled out for you. And I appreciated that the film stuck to that, as far as that tone. I didn't really need the stuff in the beginning because I felt like that added some elements to it that weren't necessary. Like, I don't connect to what happened at the beginning with Batman and Batgirl to that. I really don't. I really feel that was a separate movie. And that's kind of, I think, where my banging my head against the wall goes with this. I feel like we had this one movie that was kind of a forced prequel. And then we had the Killing Joke proper. And really the whole narrator being Batgirl, I thought Tara Strong did a great job as Batgirl's voice. I really thought that some of the Batgirl action sequences and her relationship with Batman, either predating any of that bit, when she's in the costume and trying to live up to his insane expectations, very reminiscent of what happens with the Robins. So that bit, I'm into all that.
Yeah. Why
did they take it to, sometimes you don't need to go to 11. To use a Spinal Tap reference, this goes to 11. This one didn't need to. It was fine at about 9. And you should have this Batgirl sequence in the beginning with Bruce and Batgirl should have stayed at about 9.
Yeah.
And when they went to 11, I think that they damaged the rest of the film.
Yeah, I know, and it's you think about it, because Azzarello is a writer that we both like, and he's that guy who's on my list of writers that if I see his name attached to it, I'm going to jump to it. When they first advertised Batman Killing Joke, Azzarello doing the adaptation, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be awesome, and then we get and again, it's so some of those sequences you see his really talented writing that we got in there, where we did get that story, but. To your point, and I'm actually going to completely give you this point where that should have probably been a short. And they could have done a couple different shorts, to be honest with you, where they could have showed the end of Barbara Gordon. They could have done a Jim Gordon story, showing him recovering after this. Yeah. That would have been a neat short story to put on. So you have Killing Joke, and then you have these couple short stories. Like the one story is called No More Batgirl, or Batgirl No More, or whatever, showing her stopping, why she stopped to be Batgirl. Show Gordon recovering, maybe something else. I don't know. Just, you could have done a couple short stories because they wanted to beef up the size of the movie. They didn't want to, with Killing Joke proper, it would have been a short movie. So they wanted to, let's add a little something. Hey, let's do something different, give a Batgirl story. And, if they had just kept Killing Joke with these shorts, this probably would have had a lot better, I think it would have been an amazing story.
So is your if you were to rate it on a scale of, do we want to do like a 1 to 10? To me, I think I kind of like my thing. I still say it was really good movie. Here's the problem. This is one of my favorite Batman stories. This should be great for me.
Yeah, I know.
And I hate that I have to say that it's not great, and it's not. And it's just because of some choices, it kept it being really good. So I'm not throwing it under the bus. There's things that I thought the adaptation of Killing Joke, when you get into that was really stellar. And I think anything that you connect to the beginning parts are unfortunate because of the fact that I don't think the beginning connects. I think it disconnects the second the Batgirl narrative stops. And you've got a different movie. And I'm not sure why that choice was made. I don't get it. And I think you're right in your idea that we wanted to make this a longer feature. Maybe the one shot didn't have enough story there. Where are you at on this one as far as viewer rated overall? I think you say a lot by the fact that you're like, I don't know that I'll watch it again.
Yeah, again, I don't want to kill it because, no pun intended. I don't want to kill it because of one scene. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. So I'm going to say it is a good movie. And I would recommend people watch it because, it is a good movie, and as we said, there's some really cool sequences, some really great, adaptation from The Killing Joke, and even that beginning story was a good story being told. But, it's, I don't know, man. I really don't know if I'm going to watch this again. And that always is the key. How many times do I watch something afterwards?
Can I ask you this with the animated movies in general? Let's kind of put this in context, though. Do you find yourself rewatching a lot of them over and over again after we've done discussions?
There's a couple I have. And that's the thing. There's been a couple that I've rewatched multiple times after our show and after even our conversation. I'll definitely watch it again. Go, man, let me see what. Oh, okay, I see what Sean's talking about. Yeah, I've had a couple times where I've watched a couple of the animated series. And it's funny because with me, when I get an animated series and the actual traditional comic, I usually lean towards saying the animated series was kind of like, it's kind of cooler because there's a physical treat and the voice. It's not just the voices in my head reading the dialogue. This is one of the ones where I'm going to pull out the book and read it as opposed to watch the animated again. Whereas there's been a couple that I'll watch the animated over actually reading the previous story.
Now, I don't watch a lot of them over and over again. I'm just going to be honest with you. Because of time. It's not because of quality. It's because of time. I do think what's going to hurt... Here's the thing with The Killing Joke. It's a very intense story. So a lot of times when I'll go to something again and again, I want something that's a little bit more uplifting. And this was never an uplifting story. I do reread Killing Joke, but there's a significant amount of time between those rereads. And I really reread them because of the historical significance of the book. It's a very powerful story. I think the artwork's gorgeous. If anything, I'm more inclined to page through it. I think Alan Moore's writing was terrific at the time for it. I'll rewatch this again. I do know that. I don't think I'm going to watch it again and again because it's not... I want those hoorah moments, and Killing Joke doesn't have those. Yeah. It never did, though. So it's a hard story to evaluate on the rewatchability part, because I do think they nailed the adaptation. And I'm with you in the sense that I would tell somebody they should watch it. I would caution that there's a couple of sequences where you're going to be like, what? Yeah. Why? And that part's different than the recommendation of the graphic novel, because I do think the graphic novel is a must-read.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I will always give the graphic novel a recommendation to read, and you have to go give the warning. Hey, this is because it's Killing Joke is one of those stories where when people will throw out, oh, comic books are just for kids. Oh, really? Let me have you read Killing Joke, and you tell me that afterwards. And that was always one of those things where you can hit people with about just a powerful, gripping story. Again, and Watchmen's the other one. Hey, well, same creators. It's you have those powerful stories that you get from that you can have in the comic, and Killing Joke is one of those that I always put in people's hands about saying, hey, this is a holy crud moment, in this book. This is why you can't just say comics are for kids anymore.
Watchmen's another great example, though, of a story because of its density and depth and how intense it is. I do reread it again and again periodically, but it's a big, that's a project when you're going to go reread that one. Yes. So it's kind of the same thing. I have it. I have the Absolute Edition. I love it. I'm really glad that I have it. But, it's not something where I'm going to go, it's time to reread Watchmen again, and like, I'm rereading it like every few months. I do have books like that where I'll go back to them very quickly, but they tend to be ones that are more, yeah, hoorah, in those moments. So it's interesting. I don't know. This one makes me sad just because of the fact that I want it to be great. And I think that's the tail end of it. I didn't hate it, though, and I don't have, like, this real negative vibe on it. A couple scene choices, I think, took it from being what I wanted it to be, but I still felt really good about it. I think it's a really good movie, and I would recommend to somebody who's like, I'm not going to read the Killing Joke comic. I'm like, well, you should at least watch this because the adaptation's great. You might want to skip the background stuff in the beginning and get right to the meat and potatoes, because the adaptation itself I'd recommend. That's probably what I would tell somebody. Listen, fast forward through that Batgirl sequence. When she stops talking, watch the movie. And that's hard to say because I do think that Tara Strong had some great moments. And I think there was some great writing during a lot of that.
God, yeah.
They had that Batman and Robin. Was that the one where they made the fan version that took out a lot of the nonsense? It'd be great if somebody made a version of this and took out nonsense, because I think there's a good Batgirl movie in the beginning in there as well. If you just take out like a few sequences, you've got some really good young Batgirl moments. I'd love to see a Batgirl animated movie that really allows it to be about Batgirl instead of it being kind of forced onto Killing Joke.
And you throw out Tara Strong, you got to give full credit to her and Kevin Conroy and of course Mark Hamill. The three main voices in this were absolutely wonderful. And the fact that we know the names of voice actors, the fact that we know who these people are, is a compliment towards their acting abilities. Now, granted, Mark Hamill's not just a voice actor, but we know him for this voice. We know his style. We know just and for all three of them, it perfectly fit. And it was one of those things where, again, when they're first talking Killing Joke, I heard he said he'd come back for Joker. I'm like, yeah. Kevin Conroy said, I'm back for Batman. Yeah. Then her Tara Strong back row. Yeah. And these were things that, got me really hyped for this movie to come out. So I think a major part of my criticism is towards I had such a high hopes for this movie. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be the greatest ever. What just happened? And I think that was the shock of that, even though, again, I heard the scuffle before I saw the movie. So going into it, I knew what was going to come, but I was still like, yeah, this is still going to be a great story, though. It really did derail stuff.
I didn't know going in.
Oh, okay.
I watched it fully intending to just enjoy. Did you watch it the day it came out?
No, actually, that's why I heard the gossip. I heard all the hatred towards it. And that's when I'm like, hey, I really got to watch this now.
Yeah.
Because there was just a clip. There was a headline from San Diego Comic-Con about how just they ruined the story. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And then, I just saw the one line about the sex scene between Batman and Batgirl. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's the only thing. So I didn't know anything leading up to it, how it happened or anything. I just knew there was a sex scene between the two of them. So going into this, I'm like, where did they put this in? And then I'm seeing this stuff. I'm like, wait, this wasn't in Killing Joke, was it? No, it was. And again, as I said, I didn't remember the opening of Killing Joke where it started. So seeing that, I knew that was okay. This is new. What is this? And so that was, it was, yeah.
I didn't. So I was watching and kind of strolling along going, oh, okay, interesting Batgirl story. They're showing a young Batgirl who's, really into it. It opens up with this uplifting sequence about how it used to be fun. And I'm like sitting here like, okay, it's great showing how being a vigilante's fun and, how great it was to be Batgirl and that kind of stuff. I'm like, this is kind of cool what they're doing here. And Batman being kind of his typical overprotective self, doing the thing. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that I meant when I said. They introduced it with the Robin concept. Then they went to that. I'm like, what are you doing? Why would you do this? And it does tarnish the whole thing, which is kind of sad because I really feel if I take that out of it, it's a great Killing Joke adaptation. If you just look at the Killing Joke part, it's everything that first half hour. It's like, what were you thinking? Because there were some good bits in that could have been great, and then the Killing Joke adaptation was great. It took a movie that was in every part of its execution had the potential to be great and made it really good. Which, I hate saying that for one of my favorite stories. And you're right, it does affect the rewatchability.
Yeah.
Do you think, here's the thing at this point. we're seeing a lot of adaptations that are more focused in modern storytelling. Do you, like, as I know one of them that's coming up is Teen Titans Judas Contract. They're going to do one of those, which I'm excited about. I really love the Judas Contract story. But my question is, what Teen Titans are they going to use? Are they going to use, because they've started going to, like, Damian, being the Teen Titans leader and stuff like that. Are they going to try to do that story with Damian? Or are they going to do it with the original team? See, to me, it's like either adapt it faithfully or don't do it. Because it's such a classic. Like, I'd love to see that one brought to life on the screen, but I want the players that were in Judas Contract. I want to see Judas Contract as it was, like a really strong adaptation of that. Otherwise, keep going forward. Like, because I'm liking the newer stuff they're doing a lot. And this on paper should have been fantastic. Here's the thing. I like the Dark Knight Returns two-parter a lot. Yeah. I thought that was a home run. And the nice part about that was they pretty much so captured verbatim the original 4-issue miniseries. I wish they'd just done the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, with your question on Judas Contract, I want the original. I want Judas Contract.
Yes.
I really, and normally, I'm a Damien guy. You know me. I love the little monster. And the concept of maybe Damien in Judas Contract scenario, there is a twinkle in my eye going, ooh, that'd be kind of interesting to see how Damien handles it. But then it wouldn't be Judas Contract. It would be Damien versus Deathstroke. And I don't want, I do want to see that because that'd be cool. But I want the Judas Contract story. I want how that played out, and just where, and that, for me, that's going to be another one of those where I want them to keep it with that team. They could change, they could do more modern costuming on them if they wanted to. I wouldn't have that much of an issue with tweaking the costumes, but the story that I don't want them to lose.
Oh, no, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny how it's very rarely with these animated features that they miss the mark. And I think I'm so spoiled because I usually dig I'm through the roof with these. And this is one where I was like, oh, it was good. I want it to be great. That's kind of, I know I'm saying that over and over again, so I'm going to kind of stop there at this point with it. Did you watch the Suicide Squad preview?
The Suicide Squad preview? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been seeing that. And in the special features, the Justice League Dark, little vignette they had in the special features on Killing Joke, saw that. Again, dude, man, I am pumped and excited for Justice League Dark. I'm excited for Suicide Squad. I'm really, I may break my opening night rule and actually go out on opening night for Suicide Squad.
I'm going to the 605 on Thursday. I forgot my ticket.
Oh, cool.
Because of the Valley View one by you.
Oh, you're going off of Valley View?
Oh, yeah. Because I got that XD screen. So I'm going to that one. It's not 3D. It's just the regular viewing. Yeah. It's funny. The 3D ones don't start till like 9 and midnight. And I'm like, if I can see it at 6, I'll go see it at 6. So they've got 605 on the XD screen, so I'm going to go see it. I'm excited. I want to see that one opening night. I'm a big fan of seeing movies on opening night when they're ones that I really love. And the reason why is, in the case of this one, I didn't know what fan reaction was to it. I just went in and enjoyed it. It's funny, we do a spoiler podcast, but we do spoiler warnings at the beginning for a reason. I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. I want to talk with people afterwards. Unless somebody doesn't really care to see it or read it, then, they just want to hear the commentary, great, and more power to you on that end. But I don't want to ruin an experience for somebody. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't like to know things walking in. I want to just go and enjoy it and have my own experience with it. Suicide Squad, same thing. I want to go and have my own experience. Then I want to gab about it because that's part of the fun of the community in this. Suicide Squad, I can't wait to see. That part, I'm just excited for the anticipation of it and seeing that story come out. I want that to be phenomenal. I want that to be DC's Guardians of the Galaxy. Because Guardians of the Galaxy was such a surprise over how good it was that I thought it was interesting. I'm like, wow, they're pulling this concept on screen. I didn't think it was going to be as great as it, because that movie's great. I want this to be DC's Guardians of the Galaxy, a surprise, great movie, that just comes out and just kind of gets people buzzed and talking. So, because there's already a Harley Quinn spinoff coming out of that thing. So, I don't know.
There's gonna be a Harley Quinn movie?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so already out of this whole thing, the buzz is high enough they're going to do Margot
nice.
Robbie is going to be Harley Quinn in a Harley Quinn solo movie.
Cool.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's great that like this is already generating that kind of buzz. Honestly, between Suicide Squad and then Wonder Woman afterwards, DC has potential to have a couple of home run hits back to back. Because I would like to be able to not look just to the TV for the great. You know, it's because the TV right now is phenomenal. And I want the films to be just that phenomenal. I liked. Let's talk. Can we talk just really quick about your impressions? You finally saw the Ultimate Edition of Batman Superman, and I'm like, let's wait and talk about this on a different show. We're not going to go really in depth on it right now, but I would love your impressions. For me, the Ultimate Edition was a far superior movie. They added about 30 minutes into it, and I think the bits they put in, I'm like, why didn't they release that in the theater? It's a far better movie. What are your thoughts, though? Because you left that movie in a different place than I did. So I don't know if you had the same experience.
Well, short answer, yes, I did. The long answer is this. I purchased the Blu-ray DVD combo pack because that's what I'm buying because I don't have a Blu-ray player. So I'm buying. I didn't want to have to go back and rebuy the Blu-ray later on, yada yada. So I buy the 2-pack. I'm like, hey, good. So I put the DVD in, and I'm watching it, and I'm going through, and I'm like, this looks almost identical to the theater. What's Sean talking about? And I was like, even that desert sequence, I was like, this is like the exact same thing. What the heck was Sean talking about? Was he a moron? And so I watched the whole thing from beginning to end, thinking maybe there was something else that happens, or I don't know, something like that. And I get through the whole movie, I'm like, man, this is this. So I'm looking at the box. I'm like, it says right there, extended version, extended Blu-ray version. Oh, crud! The Blu-ray extended. The DVD is the theatrical release. So I get there and I'm like, oh man, I'm an idiot. So then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? Because I don't have a Blu-ray player. So I go upstairs. I bought I go onto iTunes. I buy the extended version of it. And then I started watching. And then I couldn't watch it all in one sitting because I started watching it after watching the first time, so it was already kind of late. So then I did watch through the desert sequence. Then the following day I was able to watch the whole things. But it was funny because the extended version, get that version, watch that version, dramatically changes the movie. It not only that desert sequence is awesome, it goes from a what to a, oh my god, this was a great sequence, and it also goes into the way of saving Lex Luthor for me. I walked away from that not really liking Lex Luthor. The extended version actually saved Lex Luthor for me a lot of ways. There's still some stuff that I didn't completely agree with, but as a general rule, that was a solid Lex Luthor story, and I was very happy with that story.
Yeah, it's funny. Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor has got a little bit too much Joker in him for my liking, but the Ultimate Edition really, I thought, added like the right sequences to it. It's funny how I kind of saw some of your criticisms differently, because I know you were saying I wish these were two different movies, and I didn't want to see that because of how much I liked the Wonder Woman end bits. So that was really my stubbornness on that one. I was digging my heels in, and I still stand behind that being, because when she hits, that shield gets hit, I just wanted to see more and more and more, and I'm glad I got to see it. So I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. And I think it's different when you have seen it to like go, well, wait, but what you're saying is I wouldn't have seen that. And I'm not giving you that. No, but I'm going there for the purpose of kind of validating you with some of this. When I saw the sequences they put back in, I'm like, well, Jim was right. What Jim was really saying is that there needed to be some fleshing out of a lot of these sequences in order to make it for a better movie, which is really where you were going with this. And you were thinking, like, if they split into two films, you could have fleshed out some of this stuff more. And so I think really at the end, when I was looking at it, I was like, see, I'm thinking Jim's going to like this version more because it really started to hit on, I was specifically thinking through my head, Jim didn't like this sequence because he was like, this is too nebulous, and they needed to explain this a little bit more. They did that. The desert sequence was the one. I think the desert sequence is vastly improved.
Well, the desert sequence, the congressional sequences, Luther really did show. They really did show a Luther that he wasn't exactly the Luthor I like, but there was enough of him in there. I was like, yeah, this is a Lex Luthor. He was less Joker, less, goofy, wacky guy, more of the manipulative Lex Luthor who always has a plan, who's always one step ahead of you, who you've got to really, if you think you got a good deal from Lex Luthor, count your fingers and toes. Make sure, just to make sure you got the right deal, because that is Lex Luthor. He's got that, he's got the level of strategery that I absolutely love on the guy. He's that great monster for Superman. And I didn't see that Lex in the original theater release. The extended version, you see the signs of Lex Luthor in there. You see, okay, yeah, this is that guy.
Right. I totally agree with you. And that's where I think it fit. So here's the thing, knowing where you were at before, because my comments about the film, this made it a far better movie for me.
Yes.
Here's the thing, I won't even watch the theatrical version again. To me, it's worth watching all that extra content, because I just get the movie that it's such an enhanced, better version of the movie that I already enjoyed. But I really feel like, wow, it turned a movie that, again, I thought was really good into a great movie. Where is this one for you? Because we were in decidedly different places. Does this make this a movie that you would want to watch again?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, 100%. And again, it's one of those where I will watch, and it's funny because I want to watch Man of Steel again. Mm-hmm. It's got me that fired up that I want to watch Man of Steel again. It really got me kicked up for Justice League movies, for Wonder Woman movies. I was already excited for, just from what I saw. But even again, seeing more of Wonder Woman in there, especially the ending sequences that they cut out in the theater. I understand why they cut it for time, but those are some really powerful emotional moments with Bruce and Diana, with Lois, with the mom, just there was a lot of, the movie ended with some serious, powerful emotions in the extended version. In the theater version, you had some emotion there. You had some power. You had some whoa, because you had the funeral sequences, but it was even more in the extended version. And it's one of those things where I wish they could have put that version in the theater. That's I'm calling that the true version of Batman versus Superman, because that's what it should have been.
Can I say something here? Because I think you and I are going to say the same thing on this. I don't understand why they didn't release it in the theater that way. I don't know who could, because here's the thing. I will say this, watching the Ultimate Edition has actually soured me on the theatrical release. And remember, I was the advocate for it. So I'm going to say this, after seeing that, I'm like, what were they thinking? How could you have watched both versions? Because you just did that recently. You watched...
I watched them back to back.
And watched that. I mean, they are two very different movies. Once you see that, I'm like, how could you cut that out and go, we've made the better movie now? Yeah. Time is one thing. I get that. You want to set theatrical release to a certain time. But if there's one thing, movies like Lord of the Rings have shown... Kill Bill has shown, and stuff like that.
The Harry Potter movies are long.
Yeah, Hateful Eight, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Movies that have, an extended amount of runtime that are really good and have good buzz around them, people will go see and flock to just the same way they will the shorter movies. It's about movie quality. To me, I don't get it. I think, to me, you wreck the movie. Because here's the thing, even for me, who is an advocate for the film, there's a marked difference between the two. I don't get it. I think it's inexcusable to release it. It was poor editing. That was a big mistake.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we're both in the same boat on that. And it's funny, when I get these moments of why did they do that, I always think back to an interview I saw with Kevin Smith, where he's talking about his Dogma movie. Because there's that great scene that Jason Lee has where he talks about the nature of hell and just how horrible it is, how hell was bad when it was first created because it was the absence of God. And then you get these humans come in there and it's not enough suffering. They got to make it even worse. And he's just going on and just how nasty and horrible hell is. And you get to the point where you understand why this demon is willing to end all of existence just so he does not have to spend one more moment in hell. Yeah. And you completely understands that. Well, that's the version that's out there on the DVDs or, the scenes out there online. When it actually hit the theater, he had to cut out, that he had to cut out that whole monologue. And it was, human, do you know what it's like to be in hell? If you did, then you wouldn't want it. And they cut out the whole reasoning behind it. And Kevin Smith always talked about how he initially wanted to keep that in there, but he had all these different people telling him, and people whose opinion he respected, saying, hey, you got to take it out, man. You got to cut it. It's too long. You don't need, and he later said he wished he kept it in the theater, but you go with what the people whose opinions you trust, experts, in this field and yada, yada, and all that. And so that kind of stuff happens. And it's, but again, so I don't know why they do it, but it's one of those things where someone said, no, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I really don't get it.
Yeah.
Jim, why don't we wrap up right there, and we'll do kind of our opening and closing for this episode, because I want to get this out in a timely fashion, because I've actually got a work retreat I've got to go to. And we have some listener voicemails that we will put on our next episode.
There it is, going into that tunnel.
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. It's always in our show notes. It's always on our website. We love having you a part of our show. We do have some voicemails that we were not able to get to on this episode that will definitely be on our next episode. Remember to check out our website, ragingbullets.com, for news on what our next episodes are going to be. The next one I can tell you right now is going to be Suicide Squad. So I'm going to kind of jump to that right away and just say we're going to talk about Suicide Squad. We're also going to have your listener voicemails on there, though, so we're going to get caught up on that. Feel free to call in on that episode if you want to comment on Killing Joke, if you want to comment on Suicide Squad, or really anything DC related, how you're enjoying Rebirth, television, any of that stuff. We love hearing you guys talk about what you're enjoying about the DC Universe. Jim, we are sponsored, as always, by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. What can you tell us about DCBService.com?
Well, right now we're right before the new deals come out, but we know there's going to be bundles. Because why? Because DCBS is awesome. They give us these great bundle deals. So check it out. And thank you.
Over at InStockTrades.com, I do want to shout out, they have the DMZ Trade Paperback Book 2, 45% off, only $13.74. Noon. They just get up a little later than the rest of us. Yeah. New Teen Titans Trade Paperback Volume 5. This is the Marv Wolfman, George Perez stuff, which is phenomenal. 45% off, only $10.99. The reason why I'm pointing some of those trade paperbacks out, for less than $11, you're getting a New Teen Titans. Yeah, I'm inventing. Joke, right? Yeah, it is. I'm inventing all kinds of new comics today, and if any one of these take off, I'm going to sue. But the new, and I'm going to be disturbed actually because none of them sound good. But New Teen Titans, the trade paperback volume 5. I can't wait to read that one. I honestly have been collecting New Teen Titans again in trade paperback form because I have them in single issues. And to me, like a trade paperback or hardcover, when I want to do my rereading, is fun to sit down and read and enjoy. And I don't have these issues in any other format other than the original singles. So I want to have them in trades to be able to pull up for my reading library. So I am actually collecting these because of it. It's a great run if you haven't read them. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Jim, I'm going to try this again. We also have a Facebook group and a Facebook fan page. We also have Google Plus that we're on, Twitter. You can follow our Twitter link. We basically want to be there for you. So whatever social media you're on, we want to publish that and let you guys know what's going on with our podcast because you're important to us. And we want to thank you for supporting our podcast. Our next episode, as I said, we're going to talk Suicide Squad. I can't wait to see this one opening night. I'm super excited. You might break your... Jim, a lot of people don't know this. You don't go opening night.
Yeah, I do not do opening nights just because, one, I'm not big on crowds, and two, craziness happens on opening night, and I always just avoid it, but I may break that rule with this one because I'm actually that excited for it.
Yeah, this one I think is going to be really great. The thing that I love about it is hearing that it's already poised, based on pre-orders alone, to break box office records for this month. So I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah. I want to see that. And I'm glad, and I just want it to be a home run. I want it to be good. good. I want to go see it and just I want to be excited to talk about it on the podcast. So I hope it is one of those type of movies. The previews I'm seeing so far have me super psyched. So at this point, it's up to them to deliver the movie that I'm seeing in the previews, because I am really excited. The stuff seeing out of the San Diego Comic-Con, the cast together and the excitement that they have, and it just has me real jazzed for this one. So we will see everyone our next episode as we talk about Suicide Squad.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.